So it's time to talk about penalties, and nothing captures the imagination of fans more than penalties. And yet, despite their importance, most people struggle to separate the penalty myths from the penalty facts. So how well do you know penalties?
I'm Matt Shaw.
I'm Bradley Busch.
And this is a Sports Psychologist Breakdown.
So, to test your penalty knowledge, we have 10 statements for you. Let's see if you can separate the fact from the myth. Number 1. Your previous penalty record matters. This is one of the penalty facts. It turns out if teams have lost their last 2 penalty shootouts, they only have a 57% chance of winning the next one. Whereas teams who've won their last 2 penalty shootouts, their increased chance goes up to 89%.
Number 2. Have your best penalty takers take the first penalty. Well, we know this is actually a myth, because really, your best penalty takers should be about 4th or maybe even 5th in the line. And really, psychologists would argue this is because those latter penalties have more pressure on them, as they're more likely to be needed to be scored to win the game. The only caveat with this, though, is that in 2012, and this is what happened to Cristiano Ronaldo playing for Portugal, is that Portugal didn't even get to the 5th penalty, so he actually managed to miss out.
Number 3. It's often been said that you shouldn't trust left footers to take penalties. Is that true, or is it a myth? Well, it turns out that is indeed a fact. When we compare records, especially in the last 20 years or so, we know that left footers tend to score a lot less penalties. Their success rate is only about 58% or so, with right footers scoring over 70% of the time. Why is this the case? We're not quite sure. It might be that scouting is getting better, or that goalkeepers are getting more advanced at reading left footers. But what we do know for sure is that when the pressure's on, chances are left footers miss more than right footed players.
Number 4. Better teams take better penalties. Well, historically, more successful teams have definitely had a better status in international football, but it's not actually the case that better teams take better penalties. And really, we'd argue that because they have more expectations on them, the pressure is on, and thus they tend to lose. This could partially explain why nations like the Czech Republic and even Denmark have really successful penalty shootouts, because actually there's less expectations on them and they tend to do better. So number 4 is a myth.
Number 5. If in doubt, a player should just blast it and hit it as hard as they can. This is another penalty fact. Research recently looked at major penalties from European and international competitions and compared players who hit the ball softly with those who struck it with full force in the penalty shootout. And what did they find? If you hit it at maximum force, you might be more likely to miss the target, but if it is on target, you're far more likely to score. So if in doubt, back yourself and hit it with maximum power.
Number 6. Don't trust your young players to take your most important penalties. Well, this one again is a myth. So we know that, for example, when younger players take penalties, they actually tend to score 89% of the time, compared to older players who tend to score only about 65% of the time. And we think this can be explained because younger players play with more creativity and less worried about their status, and actually more prepared to start to forge their legacy.
Number 7. Right-footed players prefer to hit it to the left-hand side, whereas left-footed players prefer to hit it to the right-hand side. This is actually a penalty myth. Research by psychologists studying penalties have found that regardless of what foot you are, players tend to hit it to either side about the same amount of time. And although players might have a preference, game theory suggests that it's important to have a range of penalties, as it's important to keep the keeper guessing. And therefore, although they might have a preference, there's actually no difference overall depending on which foot the player is.
Number 8. Goalkeepers can distract penalty takers. Well, this one is actually true. So for example, we've seen over the years that goalkeepers that stand really big and really tall and act like they're bigger in the goal than they actually are often influence the perceptions of the penalty taker. So they start to think that the goalkeeper is bigger than they are and the goal is actually smaller than it really is. And this is what we call in psychology the Muller-Lyer effect. And the Muller-Lyer effect essentially just states that even when objects are at the same size, different people perceive them to be different sizes. So yes, goalkeepers can distract and influence the penalty takers.
Number 9. Taking a straight run up to a penalty is a bad thing to do. It turns out this one is a myth as well. Research has found that depending on if you take a run up straight or at an angle, tends to actually not make that much difference. What matters most is accuracy and power, and if a player is confident that he can get both, it doesn't really matter the angle of his run up.
Number 10. The location of the previous penalty affects where the next penalty is going. Well, this one is a myth. We know that each penalty is an independent choice and an independent outcome. And this is similar to what we call in psychology the gambler's fallacy. Now, the gambler's fallacy can best be explained like this. If I was to toss a coin 4 times, and all 4 times it landed on heads, where do you think the next one is going to land? Now, most people would say it has to land on tails, whereas we know, again, that's not the case. Each time you toss the coin, it's an independent outcome, just like a penalty shootout. So number 10 is a myth.
So there you have it. Hopefully now you are a true penalty expert and can separate your fact from your fiction and really know what's true when it comes to penalties.
And let us know what you think and what's worked well when you've taken penalties in the past. If you found this helpful, then make sure you like the video and of course subscribe for more Sports Psychologist breakdowns.